What if I told you that opening your door to a complete stranger could save your life, not theirs, yours? This is the true story of a man who had given up on everything, until a desperate woman and a frightened child appeared at his gate on the coldest morning of winter. What happened next will challenge everything you think you know about who saves whom. Sometimes people leave despite all your efforts, while some people make the effort to stay. This is the raw, unfiltered narrative of a man drowning in sorrow who decided to trust strangers and open his doors to them. What started as a simple act of kindness unlocked a future that left him speechless. Stay with me until the very end to discover who really saved whom, and let me know where you're watching from. Derek Carter was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. Once the pride of Willow Creek, Iowa, Derek had lost the spark that made him legendary with a tractor. He was tall, strong, and skilled, every piece of machinery bent to his will, like he was speaking their language. But now, his house stood, quiet and dusty, his shelves coated in years of neglect. And his evenings ended not with conversation, but with a bottle of vodka and the deafening sound of silence. The photo of him and Lisa, his ex-wife, still sat on the mantel like a monument. Two broken dreams. Once, she had been his entire world. Lisa had this incredible way of lighting up a room just by walking into it, and Derek had believed, truly, deeply believed, that they would grow old together in that house, surrounded by children's laughter and the warmth of shared memories. But she left one morning without warning, taking all the money he'd worked so hard to save. She left behind only a hastily scribbled note that offered no real explanation, just empty words about needing space and finding herself. Her absence didn't just echo through the empty halls, it screamed through them, across the cold dinner table, through every corner where her laughter used to live. Since then, Derek had merely existed, moving through each day like a ghost haunting his own life. The weight of betrayal grew heavier with each passing season, each empty evening, each morning he woke up, hoping she might have come back, only to face the brutal reality that she never would. That winter morning was colder than most, the kind of cold that cuts through your bones and settles in your soul. Derek pulled on his jacket and trudged across the icy yard to his old tractor, his breath forming clouds in the bitter air. But he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw them. A woman in a thin coat that clearly wasn't meant for this weather stood at his gate, holding the hand of a little boy. Her lips were blue from cold, her whole body shaking, and when she spoke, her voice cracked like ice breaking. "Please, we need a place to stay. Just one night. We have nowhere else to go." Derek hesitated, every instinct telling him to protect himself from more disappointment, more betrayal. But something in her eyes, not just desperation, but a fierce determination to protect her child, made him reach into his coat pocket. He handed her the key without a word. "The house is warm, there's some food, I'll be back tonight, just don't break anything." He turned and walked to the barn, trying to shake the feeling that something fundamental in his life had just shifted, like tectonic plates moving deep beneath the surface of his carefully controlled world. The workday dragged on like torture. Derek couldn't stop thinking about the woman and child. Were they safe? Were they warm? Had he made a terrible mistake? On his way home, he stopped by the local store. His usual purchase, a bottle of vodka, to numb another empty evening, was joined by something unexpected, a bag of candy. He didn't even know why he bought it, but something told him he should. When he reached his home, he stopped in absolute shock. The windows glowed warmly, casting golden light across the snow-covered yard. Inside, the once-dead house had come alive. The books that had been scattered on the floor for months were back on the shelves. The table was set with actual place settings. A pot simmered on the stove, filling the air with the smell of real cooking. And in the old rocking chair, the one that had sat empty since Lisa left, sat the woman, wrapped in a blanket with the little boy curled next to her, reading a book. "I hope you don't mind," she said, as Derek stepped inside, her voice uncertain, but hopeful. "We cleaned up a bit and made dinner." Derek looked around at his transformed home, feeling something crack open in his chest. He didn't mind, not at all. For the first time in years, his house felt like a home. The woman introduced herself as Rachel Evans, and the boy was Ethan, 6 years old, shy, and wide-eyed like a deer ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Derek handed him the candy, and Ethan looked to his mother for permission before accepting. When he finally smiled, something deep inside Derek stirred to life. Something he thought had died with his marriage. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, curled up on the couch, like he belonged there, Rachel shared her story. She had once been a college student in Des Moines, full of dreams and possibilities, but a man she trusted, a man she thought loved her, betrayed her, left her pregnant, and vanished like smoke. She returned home to her mother, hoping for support, for safety. Instead, she found new trouble waiting. Her mother's new boyfriend. Rick turned his attention to me, Rachel whispered. Her eyes cast down like she was ashamed of something that wasn't her fault. When I stood up to him, when I told my mother what he was doing, she didn't believe me. She said I was trying to ruin her happiness, that I should leave. But she wanted to keep Ethan. I couldn't let that happen, so I ran. Derek listened in silence. But inside, fury was building like a storm. Every detail Rachel shared twisted something deep in his chest. The betrayal by her mother, the cruelty of Rick, the fear she carried even now, it all hit too close to home. He had known loneliness. But this was something deeper, something that called for more than sympathy. It demanded action. In that quiet firelit room, Derek made a silent vow so strong it felt etched into his very bones. No one would hurt them again. Not under his roof, not on his watch. He would protect them, not just out of kindness, but because it felt like the rightest thing he'd ever committed to do in his entire life. In the days that followed, Rachel brought life back to the home in ways Derek had forgotten were possible. She scrubbed floors until they gleamed, folded laundry with the kind of care that spoke of making a home, and always had something warm cooking that filled the house with smells that made it feel alive again. Ethan followed Derek around like a devoted puppy, helping him feed the hens, pretending to drive the tractor with serious concentration, asking 1,000 questions about everything. Derek found himself looking forward to coming home for the first time in years. Evenings were now filled with laughter, stories, and the soft thunder of Ethan's feet racing across the wooden floors. The bottle of vodka sat on the shelf, untouched. Forgotten. Of course, in small towns, nothing goes unnoticed. Nancy Green, a sharp-tongued neighbor with too much time on her hands, cornered Derek one afternoon at the hardware store. "You've been smiling more lately. Got yourself a woman, huh?" She laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. Derek laughed it off, but unease settled in his chest like a weight. The last thing Rachel needed was gossip, or worse, someone recognizing her. Someone who might know Rick or her mother. His fears proved justified. That night, Rachel met him at the door, pale and shaking like a leaf in a storm. "A man was here today. Said he was looking for a woman with a child. He knew what we looked like. I think it was Rick." A few days later, Derek returned home to find a black sedan parked at his gate, like a bad omen. Carol, Rachel's mother, and Rick stood on his porch with the confidence of people who thought they held all the cards. "I'm here for my grandson," Carol said flatly, her voice cold as winter wind. "He belongs with me, not with some stranger and my ungrateful daughter." Derek squared his shoulders, feeling every inch of his height and strength. "This is my house, and they're not going anywhere." His voice carried a finality that made Rick take a step back. Rachel stepped outside, Ethan hiding behind her, clutching her skirt like it was his anchor in a storm. "You don't have that right," Rachel said, her voice stronger than Derek had ever heard it. Carol sneered with the cruelty only family can deliver. "You have no job, no home, no stability. He belongs with me, where he'll have structure and discipline." That's when Ethan, voice trembling but determined, said loudly enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, "I want to stay with Mum and Derek." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Carol's face twisted with rage. But she had no answer for a child's honest truth. She turned to leave, but not before delivering a warning that chilled Derek to the bone. "You'll regret this." Both of you. Derek knew threats like hers carried weight in small towns where people talked, and judges sometimes listened to the wrong voices. The next morning, he drove to Des Moines and met with a lawyer. The solution was legal guardianship, not just a legal term, but a lifeline, a shield, a declaration of intent that would protect them from people like Carol and Rick. For Derek, it meant stepping fully into the role he had been slowly growing into since the moment Rachel and Ethan walked into his life. It meant putting his name on paper, not just as a caretaker, but as a protector and father figure. The process wouldn't be easy, but Derek didn't hesitate for even a second. The lawyer explained that legal guardianship would provide Rachel and Ethan with immediate protection and keep Carol and Rick from claiming any legal rights over the boy. Derek left the law office, not just with a plan, but with a renewed sense of clarity. This wasn't charity anymore. This was responsibility, purpose, love. Back home, he sat Rachel down at the kitchen table where they'd shared so many meals, so many conversations, so many moments that had slowly built into something beautiful. "Make it official," he said, reaching across the table to gently take her hand. "They won't be able to touch you or Ethan. I spoke with a lawyer. We can apply for temporary guardianship. It's the safest option right now, and it's what I want to do." Rachel blinked rapidly, her eyes filling with tears that spoke of relief, gratitude, and something deeper. Her voice cracked when she asked, "Why would you do all this for us? We barely know you. You don't owe us anything." Derek looked at her with eyes that held all the truth he'd discovered about himself since they'd arrived. His voice was low and steady, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Because you made this house a home again. You gave me a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to smile, a reason to believe that good things can still happen. You and Ethan, you brought warmth back into my life." He paused, gathering the courage to say what his heart had been whispering. "For weeks, Rachel, before you came, this place was just walls and wood. Now it's alive. You've reminded me what it feels like to be needed, to be wanted, to be part of something bigger than my own pain. And I don't want to go back to the way things were ever." Weeks passed, each one bringing a stronger sense of routine and belonging that felt as natural as breathing. The paperwork was finally approved, and with each passing day, Ethan grew more attached to Derek. At first, the word "Dad" slipped out hesitantly, barely audible, like he was testing to see if it was allowed. But Derek never corrected him. Eventually, Ethan said it with confidence, even pride, and the bond they shared had grown into something real and unbreakable. Then came a quiet Sunday morning in early spring. The kind of morning that feels like the world is holding its breath in anticipation, under a handmade arch of pine boughs and winter berries, surrounded by a few kind-hearted neighbors who had become like family. Rachel and Derek exchanged vows in the front yard of the very house that had once been a symbol of Derek's solitude. Ethan wore a little bow tie and beamed with joy, clutching both their hands as they said, "I do." His smile was so bright it could have powered the whole town, and when they kissed, he cheered like they'd just won the World Series. The house that had once echoed with silence now rang with laughter, warmth, and the comforting clutter of a family fully formed. Every room breathed with new life, toys under tables, a pie cooling on the counter. School drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets shaped like farm animals. Carol never returned. The threat had been empty, just like her promise to love and protect her daughter. Derek no longer stared at the photo of Lisa. It had long since been taken down and replaced with something infinitely more precious. Now his walls held Ethan's drawings, Rachel's hand-stitched quilts, and photographs of a life reclaimed from the ashes of disappointment. He had opened his door to a stranger, a woman with tired eyes and a little boy who barely spoke. It could have ended with a meal and a warm night, a simple good deed done and forgotten. But instead, it became something much deeper, something that transformed not just their lives, but his soul. That single act of kindness unlocked something in Derek that he thought had died, the capacity to love without reservation, to trust without guarantee, to hope without certainty. A man who had once resigned himself to loneliness and regret discovered that sometimes the people who need saving the most are the ones who think they're doing the saving. Over time, those strangers became the heartbeat of his home. The laughter of a child echoed through one's silent halls, and the presence of a loving woman filled rooms that had stood cold and empty for years. In doing so, Derek hadn't just found a family, he had rediscovered his own purpose, his own worth, his own capacity for joy, and with it, he found a life worth living again. Here's the question that will stay with you long after this story ends. If a stranger showed up at your door with nothing but fear in their eyes and a child by their side, would you let them in? Would you have the courage to risk your heart one more time? Sometimes the greatest act of faith isn't believing in God or destiny, it's believing that broken people can heal each other. Share your honest thoughts and opinions with me in the comments, and thank you for joining Stories That Breathe for another reminder that miracles often come disguised as ordinary moments of human kindness.